Every Voice Speaks unites and empowers the muscular dystrophy community by elevating patient voices and fostering collaboration across conditions like LGMD, FSHD, myotonic, Becker, and Duchenne. Through personal stories, expert interviews, and accessible discussions, the show helps listeners understand drug development and learn how their input can influence trials, policies, and care. By centering lived experience, it strengthens advocacy, advances research, and supports better futures for kids and adults living with muscular dystrophy.
And Pat, you and I have been friends now for quite a minute now, and I wanted to say something. You have 2E, and it's so ultra rare. When I look at how many patients I know with 2E, it's very, very little. So when we talk about a future drug developer coming into the 2E space, I haven't heard of one. And I see that the other subtypes are having drug developers interested. And I see with 2E that I've not heard like a new company saying, "Oh, we'll pick up 2E." I don't really hear or see that happening.
Yeah.
And so between when we talk about, your community of 2E, I just wanted you to talk a minute about, what that's like and your concerns about, some of these ultra rare subtypes in the LGMD space. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
Thank you, Kat. I feel like with my condition being so rare, just getting this far almost feels like a moonshot, and it's amazing that it's happening. My fear is that I'm going to only get one chance, and I don't mean me, Patrick. I mean the 2E community, or any of the more rare subtypes. So my fear is that if Sarepta has to leave the space or give up the space for financial reasons, or because the science is not working and they can't sustain it, my fear is that I'll just disappear and I won't ever have another chance at this. I've already lived to be 53 at the time of this recording, and I didn't think it would ever get this far. I kept telling myself maybe someday, and I have hope. But it may even be too late for me specifically because of my heart and lung involvement. But I am afraid that if Sarepta does not carry this torch, another company may look at this and say, just on a financial basis and from the difficulty of the science, this is not worth it. So would really like to talk to companies directly out there and hopefully they reconsider because of the things that we mentioned on this podcast, where one hopefully will unlock others. And there's all data and stuff to be advanced in all muscular dystrophies. So obviously, at a personal level, I would be heartbroken if another company didn't rush into the space and say that's valuable for us. We should work on that. But I think I would be more heartbroken for the entire community as a whole because it's something that's being worked on, and then I don't think it should just be dropped. So I don't know, Kat. Maybe
Mm.
you and I have to start a research company, and no, I'm just kidding. We don't have the we're the face of the disease. We're certainly not the researchers. But I think I would be devastated. So I hope somebody realizes that if Sarepta goes out, somebody needs to come in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And we started really talking about every age, stage, and subtype deserves a
Yeah.
treatment. And uh it's, kind of the new thing that I'm starting to say is, we all deserve a treatment, and
Yes.
but not just LGMD, all of the muscular dystrophies do. And it's one of the reasons why we started really this podcast is to really talk about all of the different muscular dystrophies that are in our space. And I want to say something too to our patient community. You know, a lot of people in the LGMD space have been very upset over the Sarepta uh, leaving our space, but they're still in our space, but they're not able to financially develop treatments. And I know it's very frustrating for me, and I, experienced a lot of anger and frustration at this company. And I also do see a lot of people in this company are really trying still to really
Yes.
get treatments, and they're still doing stuff. And
Yes.
there's very few experts in the LGMD space. And so it's one of these, this is a good conversation today to have because I think we need to uh, have these conversations and be open to it. And I don't know that really there's podcasts out there that are actually having these hard conversations because, we're willing to kind of have a dialogue, and it's, a difficult dialogue, and everybody has an opinion about this, and it's a hard conversation to have, but I'm so thankful
Yes.
that, you're willing to talk about your experience with 2E. And just I knew how difficult it was for you because you were actually going to be at an event I was gonna be at
Yes.
when this hit you like like an avalanche with your health,
Yep.
and I didn't know that you were gonna be alive the next week.
I know.
And, for people who, are living with this disease and are older, and, when it starts to affect your heart, it starts to affect your breathing, it's scary as hell.
Yes, it is.
And, and it's like whack-a-mole. When I say whack-a-mole, it's like what crazy thing is gonna crop up next that you have to go chase down to make sure you're not gonna die of it in a month. And it's a horrible thing to have this type of thing hanging over your head. And so, I'm thankful that you're willing to talk about it, but I also understand your perspective too, because, very we don't have a lot of chances at this. And
Correct.
when I was looking at who are the advocates to speak up for the 2E, it's the furthest along, it's gone through phase 3.
Right.
And I think, there's very, very few that are standing up for this community. And so, so thank you for talking about it and bringing all of these issues in a public forum. I mean, talk about your health is a hard thing in front of a lot of people, and I want to say thank you
Yes.
for doing that. So,
Well, thank you for also creating the platform that we can share this with the broader community. I do know I have never met another individual living with 2E in person, but I have internet relationships with a few, and there's a Facebook support group, and also there's a Facebook support group out of Italy for 2E, but it is so rare that I have encouraged others to even write, blog, document because everybody needs to be heard from. So I hope people also out there listening to this kind of step up. And I think to your point earlier, Kat, of how difficult it is, I agree wholeheartedly. But the advancement of science, the advancement of the human condition, the advance of society is not going to be neat and pretty. It's messy, it's people
mhm.
debating. It's people that don't agree. It's people with a lot of passionate opinions because we're talking about life. So I think that to move it forward,
Well,
it is going to be messy and it's going to be sometimes unkept, but the hard conversations cannot be ignored. So I think that's my favorite part about this whole podcast with you is that we have a lot of connections and we're able to bring people out here and ask them some harder stuff. We have to continue to do that or else things will not advance, right? They talked today a little bit about more about the difficulties. Maybe someone in our audience will now say, oh, I didn't realize how hard it was to even get a meeting with the FDA. They're not all evil people, but they have a job to do as well. They have to protect the safety of human beings. So everything takes time, but I think you and I feel like we're dragging this into the present and dragging this into the future. And if we have to drag it a little bit kicking and screaming, I'm okay with that because it's going to be messy, but we have to keep having the tough conversations. So I don't know if now this becomes, uh, uh,
yeah,
um, a coda to our show. Maybe this becomes a prelude. Maybe this becomes a separate little half bonus episode of you and I talking about our thoughts. Maybe it's an outtake, but that's why we're doing this. So I think that's good to be on the record for. So thank you for putting your trust in me. Um, and thank you for having me as your co-host.
yeah,
I've been loving this so far.
definitely. I love it too. It's so valuable to me, and I feel a refreshing feeling when we have
Yep.
these meetings, and just these podcasts. And I just really to think, for all of our muscular dystrophy communities, it's really more about like advancing the field and discussing
Yes.
the difficulties of drug development. And
Yes.
we've had, yeah, it's you know right now we're at an inflection point for rare diseases, and especially in the muscular dystrophy area we're seeing, a lot of things happening. What I would like to say, and you cracked me up when you said, let's start a biotech. I've actually thought about, let's start one, So it's like, remember Legally Blonde? Like it's hard. You remember? Like
Uh-huh.
it's hard. It's trying to get into Harvard. It's like, we can start a biotech. Like it's hard, but it is really funny that we're becoming extremely savvy in the patient community. Like, I literally was talking to, Brad Williams a few weeks ago, and he's like, "Well, I think I have 5 potential, you know, small molecules that'll work for limb-girdle." And I was like, "Okay." And then the other day, he's like, "I found another biomarker that's working for other LGMDs. I think it could work for limb-girdle." And, it's funny to me, like, our space is, like, becoming, like, a lot of people that are really learning. I don't know what the
Yeah.
heck is going on, but it's like we're really understanding the science,
Well,
better,
that
and we're not necessarily, some of us are scientists and some of us aren't. Yeah.
well, and I'm definitely not. I'm an artist and a musician, as a lot of you know. But what makes
Mhm.
me crack up is
Yeah.
also we're becoming the hub, which is what I think we should be. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about how it has to be patient centered, and everyone says that. But what really that means is we have to be at the table all the time. So for somebody to say to you, "Hey, I found this," instead of being shocked,
Mhm.
I think we should begin to expect that. They owe us that much. And again, we're able to come into their space and say, hey, but we're also the people living with this. So for us to be becoming the hub, and I've had people say to me at the conference I was at last week, there were almost 1,000 people. A lot of people came to me and said, I've also been listening to your podcast with the Speak Foundation, and it hits heavy because of the guests we've had on, and because let's also face it, our limb girdle family is not that big. So sooner or later, everyone's going to know everyone, but it's kind of cool to be able to keep our faces out there. Even though, people say I have a face for radio, it's cool to keep us out there front and center and become the hub, and people have asked me, can I come on the show? I think that's great. So I hope we can keep it going. And we're also,
Absolutely.
listen, Kat, we're adding to the historical record. What we're doing now is going to be here when we're not. And to me, that's very important because I want people to realize that we stand on the
Right.
shoulders of the people that came before us, and it will be the same for the
Oh
people
my
that come
gosh.
after,
Yes.
right?
Oh my gosh. Amen, brother. And I just want to add one more
Yes.
thing. Like, if you're new to the space in the last 3 to 4 years, and just got diagnosed and you
Oh, so
walked
different.
in, and
Yep.
you're looking, it's so different than it was 20
Yep.
years ago. And I just want to say, like, you know, don't shoot the messenger, and also be thankful to the people that built what we have today, because I look around and I see, in the Duchenne community, we had Pat Furlong on, and, I see these patients who are no longer with us, who worked hard in advocacy to get the MD Care Act, to get
Yes.
a lot of the things that we have today done. And, it's really, really important. When you said historical record, it's like to understand that where we are right now, all of that came from the backs of patients in wheelchairs who got us where we're at today. And, and I think back, like, that 2019 convening conference for the entire, for example, LGBT community, came from 3 patients that put
Right.
that together and brought in a community. And, and I think and those 3 patients were all in wheelchairs. And but I think that you hit the nail on the head. And, just to really, thank those people who brought us where we're at. It's so critical. It's like that saying, "Dance with the girl that you went to prom with," whatever. And, it's like a thing of, just kind of being having some gratitude for where we're at, for all of these researchers that have been at it for years, and, like, the knowledge that we've gained.
It's their life's work, and they don't know us.
Yeah,
They
I
they
think
don't know us. They need to do now, but when they started, they weren't.
yeah,
Like Jerry Mendel, pioneer, he had no idea. So they take this on knowing there's people out there, and then we've gotten to meet some of these researchers, which is amazing. But yeah, they've given over their life's work to try to make other people's lives better, and people that they have never met, and they don't even know. So that's to me, that's the humanity of the whole thing,
yeah,
which is what I love the best. And
yeah,
look, everybody needs community. So we're building a community that's going to be welcoming, that is welcoming to everybody living with this. And also, I feel like we've been given a cross to bear that's pretty heavy, but we've also been given the gift of grace where we can educate and we can change so many people's thinking by saying, look, I use a wheelchair. However, I also have a family. I have children. I drive. I work. I travel. And everyone says, that's so amazing. I don't want that to be the amazing part. I'm the same. So
yeah,
we get to change society by coming on here and talking about what we do regardless of muscular dystrophy. We talk about how we live, but I think we're blessed with the fact that we can change the world by talking about how the world views disability and how the world views society views us. I always say, I'm not the problem. The problem is society hasn't caught up yet. Or, I'm not the problem. The situation is the problem. So how can we fix and help the
I agree.
situation? So when you and I talk, that's what I
Yeah,
always do. Before we go on and record a broadcast, I have a few quiet moments to myself and I always think, okay, how can we help other people today? And how can we make someone else say, oh, you know what? I, I will get more involved or I don't feel so alone. To me, that's the whole thing right there.